and welcome to this special edition on I24 News. I'm Laura Cellier, and a political landslide in the United States. Donald Trump has beaten Kamala Harris and will serve a second term as the 47th president of the United States. Republicans have also won control of the Senate and are forecast to win the House of Representatives as well. Well, in this programme, we'll be focusing on the impact on Israel and the wider region. We'll hear from Saudis, Iranians, Egyptians, Israelis and Palestinians. But first, our Jody Notalovitz takes us through the results. Take a look.
After months of anxious waiting by U.S. voters, Donald Trump cleared the 270 electoral votes needed to clinch the presidency, making him the 47th president of the United States. A remarkable recovery for a former president who 4 years ago incited an uprising at the U.S. Capitol, was convicted of felonies, and escaped 2 assassination attempts.
We overcame obstacles that nobody thought possible, and it is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy?
Despite many states still counting votes, Trump claimed victory in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Surrounded by family members and key allies, he declared a, quote, unprecedented and powerful mandate to supporters in Florida. Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, echoed his remarks.
I think that we just witnessed the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States of America.
Trump outlined his vision for a potential second term, promising to, quote, fix everything about our country.
We want to have borders. We want to have security. We want to have things be good, safe. We want great education. We want a strong and powerful military, and ideally we don't have to use it.
Leading into Tuesday, polls showed a tie between the former president and the current vice president, Kamala Harris. 7 p.m. saw polls closing in 6 states that control 60 of the 270 electoral college votes needed to win the White House. And by 2 a.m., Trump had won the swing states of North Carolina and Georgia and was leading in several others. As of 5:45 a.m., Trump had won 279 electoral votes to Harris's 223. Fox News then projecting that Trump had won the state of Pennsylvania, which all but closed off Harris's chances of winning the U.S. presidency. Her supporters then seen leaving Howard University, an announcement being made that her speech would be delayed until the following day. Once the vote is certified by Congress, Trump and his incoming vice president, U.S. Senator J.D. Vance, are due to take office on Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2025.
4 years ago. Well, I'm delighted to introduce my studio guests this hour. Asher Friedman is the director of the Misgav Institute for National Security. Welcome, Asher. We're also joined by Yaakov Lapin. He's the host of the Lapin Assessment on Patreon, and he's a military and strategic affairs analyst at the Miriam Institute and the Jewish News Syndicate as well. Welcome to you, Yaakov. Great to have you both with us. So, first of all, let's start with immediate reactions. As Israelis, is Trump's victory good or bad for Israel at this very critical time?
Trump's victory creates the potential for restarting the momentum on the Abraham Accords, for joint Israeli-American action on Iran, returning the approach of maximum sanctions, for deepening cooperation in a whole host of issues, and for adopting new paradigms on the Palestinian issue as well. Now, we still don't know exactly what we'll see in the second Trump presidency, but the potential is there for a significant change and for significant new opportunities in the Israel-U.S. alliance.
So there is a significant potential upside during a Trump presidency. Do you agree with that? Yaakov.
I do. I think that we have to look at what Trump is going to be replacing. So, we've had a Biden administration where up until now, yes, it has certainly been critical in Israel's ability to defend itself. It has sent massive amounts of armaments, plane loads of armaments to Israel, but it has placed restrictions when Israel goes on the offense. It attempted to force Israel into an early ceasefire in Gaza. It didn't want to see the Lebanon maneuver take place or the war against Hezbollah. And it, explicitly stated, the Biden administration, that the last thing it wants to see is a regional war involving Iran. Now, the problem is that this regional war is already occurring. So what was Israel supposed to do? It could only have taken on its enemies and not absorbed these blows. And so the potential here is for a freer hand, at the very least, for Israel. And the first thing that comes to mind is Iran's nuclear program. I think this is the next big thing on the agenda. And this creates new opportunities, potentially new freedom of operation, both at the military and at the diplomatic level perhaps a Trump White House will be much more supportive of action against that nuclear program by Israel.
OK, there is, however, an element of unpredictability with Donald Trump, isn't there? And we are going on his first term as president. We don't know if he will have similar policies in his second term. Just on the issue of wars and ceasefires, I mean, he has said himself he wants to stop wars rather than start them. He wants to end the destruction, as he put it, in Lebanon. And he's actually said he wants to end the war in Lebanon before his inauguration. I mean, is there a risk that he could force settlements on Israel?
He has made all those statements. Partly we have to wait to see who are the people who are going to be around the president, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor. Those are all critical roles. And there are some very, very good people who are likely candidates for some of those roles. I think the message that Israel has to send is that the way to end wars is to defeat our enemies, defeat the terrorists, defeat the radical regimes. If we end the war and leave the terrorists in power, then we're going to have recurring wars over the coming years. So that's not going to lead to any kind of permanent quiet. The only way to lead to sort of more permanent peace and quiet is by achieving victory and achieving the war aims. One thing that we are likely to see, this is very important, is that the threat of the Biden administration to withhold critical arms from Israel, which has been an important consideration in Israel's military planning, is unlikely to be the case in the case of a Trump administration.
Do you agree with that, Yaakov?
Yeah, I do agree that the threat of an arms embargo, which has been very troubling and been sort of held up in the air again and again, I think that threat is likely to disappear. And while I agree that Trump will be in no hurry to involve the United States directly in any military conflicts, my hunch is that he will be a lot more forthcoming if America's allies are the ones that take on their enemies. Primarily, I'm talking about Israel right now and Iran and the entire Iranian axis. My hunch is that he will have a much more, let's say, tolerant view of that kind of military action if the communications are in place and if he surrounds himself, as Asher said, with friends of Israel, with realists, with people who understand that in the Middle East, if you want to empower the moderate Sunni bloc, you have to take away the power of the radical Iranian axis, which Israel has already done to a very major degree, but there's more work to be done. So I think the hope is that Israel has a freer hand to act against its enemies and to begin to stabilize the region.
Right. A lot depends, as you both point out, on who President Trump surrounds himself with. Well, I want to bring in another guest to talk about these big foreign policy issues and what it means for the region. Eric Mandel is the founder and director of the Middle East Political Information Network, and he's a senior editor for security at the Jerusalem Report. Great to have you with us, Eric. So, on the Abraham Accords, on Iran, on the conflict with the Palestinians, what can we expect to change as a result of Trump's victory?
Well, first, I think what Yaakov and Asher said, I agree with. First, I wanted to talk about what could happen until inauguration. President Biden is still the president. Will he be someone who wants to have a legacy that he ended the war in Gaza? That can mean tremendous pressure on Israel. Is he going to be closer in that way to President Obama in his parting shot when he left in 2016, when he created UN Security Council Resolution 2334? Or will he be like a Democratic president at the end, like President Clinton, who tried desperately for a peace deal, which obviously didn't work out and led to the second Intifada? Regarding I have spoken to senior advisors in both campaigns, and one of the things I've told them is if I could whisper in President Trump's ear, is to have some strategic patience. Israel cannot really end the war in Gaza. Granted, Hamas is destroyed, but I think they need to understand that it's going to be closer to what goes on in the West Bank. And Israel's going to need to go back in there to fight the thousands of terrorists that are still in the tunnels not found. In the north, with Lebanon, you're dealing with a situation where Israel has to have something with consequences if Hezbollah comes in, if there is a ceasefire, that Israel has a free range of action to go in and prevent anything regarding south of the Litani River. And regarding Iran, the head of the octopus, as Naftali Bennett has said, will America strike Iranian nuclear facilities? Does Israel have the capability? We keep saying Israel has opened the path, but Israel does not have 30,000-pound bombs. It's a much more difficult operation. So how much leeway will the president give? So it will depend upon if the Pompeos are back, Or will the people closer maybe to what Vice President-elect Vance says, who seem to be more isolationist? And the last thing I'll just say is regarding arms to Israel. I would expect that the next MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, may be the last, whether it was a Democratic or Republican president. And I think that is something that might turn out to be, for the long run for Israelis, a healthier relationship with the United States.
Yeah, there's definitely a recurrent theme here, isn't there? That a lot depends on who President Trump chooses to surround himself with going into that second term. And I will be speaking to a former assistant to the former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, later in the programme to get his take on that. But I want to ask you, Eric, about the relationship between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. They reportedly spent 20 minutes on the phone this afternoon. Now, they did initially have a pretty good relationship, didn't they? But that changed after Netanyahu congratulated Joe Biden when he beat Trump in 2020. Are you worried about that relationship? Are you worried that, you know, we know that Trump does take things personally? Might he seek to take that out on Israel?
You know, I don't think so. I think they do have a good working relationship. I think they will be more aligned. I think Bibi feels more freedom to act now that President Biden and what would have been a President Harris would have been there. But the president, you know, values people who are loyal. And, you know, could there be some residual from way back 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago, that he congratulated President Biden in that election? I don't know. My guess is, and I feel strongly that they will work better together. The question here is, can they work and be aligned on their time course? You know, President Trump, a transactional president, wants things done right away. The Middle East doesn't fall into that pattern. You need to have not Western eyes on this. You need to be on a Middle East timeline. And that is the one thing I will, if I have the opportunity, tell the Trump administration to be patient, to advance American national security interests, which are coincident, to my mind, 95% of the time with the Israelis.
Eric, great to get your take on that. Thank you very much indeed. And we look forward to welcoming you to the studio in the not too distant future. Thank you. Eric Mandel there. Asher, you wanted to respond?
Eric mentioned the Vice President Vance. Vice President-elect Vance gave a very important speech where he explained that while he has reservations regarding aid to Ukraine, he's quite supportive of aid and American support to Israel. What he said was that was very important was that America empower Israel and its allies to defend themselves, to empower them. And I think that going forward, if we're looking at the possibility of a Middle East security architecture where Israel works with its Middle East allies and the United States to defend itself and for the countries of the region to defend themselves against the threat, that could be a very positive development.
Yes, and J.D. Vance has said that he is a strong supporter of the Abraham Accords,
right.
which you... Yeah, real quickly.
And just quickly, I would say that it's impossible to divorce the regional struggle that's underway here from the larger global struggle. The UAVs that are being flown at us here are the same UAVs that Russia is flying into Kiev. Russia is an ally of Iran. China is there as well. Those three are trying to undermine the entire U.S.-led system in the world. And so I hope that the Trump administration is aware of that global linkage, and strengthening America means strengthening all of America's allies.
Yeah, good point, Jakob. OK, well, during his first term, President Trump enacted a ban on immigration from Muslim-majority countries. He also made several strongly pro-Israel moves. He moved the U.S. Embassy, of course, to Jerusalem, and he recognised Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. And part of the reason he is so strongly supported here are those moves that he made during his first term. Why, then, did he pick up the votes of so many Arab and Muslim Americans this time around, even in Dearborn, Michigan, a town that is known to be strongly pro-Palestinian? And there were watch parties with people celebrating Trump's win last night. We're here to talk a bit more about that. We're joined by Hussein Bakr Mansour. He's a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, Hussein. Good to see you again. And I mean, obviously, Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, this is a huge group of people. These are not a monolithic voting group, but there was undeniably some key support among those communities for Donald Trump. How do you explain that?
Well, first of all, we have to indicate that the Trump campaign actually worked very hard in order to mobilize more support within the Arab and Muslim community, especially with Massad Bolus, a Lebanese-American businessman who's also Tiffany Trump's father-in-law, taking charge of outreach to Arab and Muslim Americans. I met him a few times. He was working very hard, traveling to Michigan and Northern Virginia, other places where you have large populations of Arab and Arab Muslim Americans, trying to get that support. People forget that actually Arab Americans, which is a very large group and also has a significant, if not majority, Christian and not Muslim, has been actually voting Republican before 9/11. That is, most of the Arab and Muslim voters who have conservative values find usually that their own family values align better with the Republican Party. And that was the case historically. This changed after 9/11, the war on terrorism, neocon policies in the Middle East, which shifted things significantly within these communities who felt that they were under attack, the fears over Islamophobia, and of course the wars in the Middle East and so on. This already has been starting to shift. I would say in the year before October 7th, you had many Muslim and Arab Americans forming groups angry specifically at the issue of school choice and all the controversies about LGBTQ plus education in the universities. You had them even forming alliances with conservative groups like Moms for Liberty. That was a big deal, for instance, in Northern Virginia. We've seen that played out actually for almost an entire year before October 7th. Then after October 7th, you had many parts of Arab and Muslim community who are thinking now they are getting nothing from the Democrats. They are not giving them what they need internally for their own families, and they don't really prioritize their own foreign policy preferences. And you had this new realignment within the community that you had people, well, we have to get at least something with the outreach, along with the strong outreach from the Trump campaign. You had this larger turnout. And you see it also, we don't have to focus just on the Arab American voters. If you look at the Hispanic voters, you'll find that President Trump this time picked significantly a lot of Latino and Hispanic voters. So this is also happening across all minority groups.
What about the idea that there was a certain level of alarm amid these Arab American communities, you know, sometimes second, third, fourth generations who have come from countries like Iraq and other places, and they were just simply worried about what they saw on American streets, open support for Islamism and for jihadism and things that their parents or their grandparents had escaped. Do you think there was a sense that the Democrats didn't do enough to stamp that out? They didn't do enough to condemn it?
Definitely among the more secular parts of the Muslim American and Arab American communities, this has been the case for quite some time. And actually long before October 7th, we know that you have groups with strong Islamist ties, if not outright Islamist, with a strong ties and history to the Muslim Brotherhood. For example, CAIR, the Council of American Islamic Relations, who've been strong allies of the Democratic Party. You had figures of them constantly being, whether with the Obama administration or with the Biden administration, becoming these representatives of Muslim Americans in the intersectional coalition. And you already had a strong reaction against that, specifically from anti-Islamist Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. So that's definitely there. The change here are other people who don't think that way, not necessarily the secular. They are actually more conservative, and they are pro-Palestine, and they have the traditional political allegiances for this demographic who decided to leave the Democratic Party altogether and vote for Trump.
Yeah, fascinating to see this new realignment and these new coalitions being built. Hussein Abu Bakr, Mansour, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the new leader of Hezbollah has dismissed Trump's victory and says the outcome of the US election will have no impact on any possible ceasefire with Israel. Hezbollah fired a major barrage of rockets at central Israel today, and there was even a direct impact in the central city of Ra'anana, while a rocket fell close to Tel Aviv's main airport as well. The new leader of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, made this statement earlier.
When the enemy decides to stop the aggression, there will be a path to negotiations that we have defined clearly. We demand indirect negotiations through the Lebanese state and President Barry, who holds the political banner of the resistance. Negotiations must be leading to Lebanon's stature and the end of the aggression. Even now, we don't build hopes on the American elections. Whether Harris succeeds or Trump succeeds, this is of no value to us. We also do not rely on general political maneuvering. We also don't rely on thinking that Netanyahu is satisfied with some of his gains. No, we will rely on the battlefield. We will make him understand clearly that on the battlefield he is a loser and not a winner, and that this loss will prevent him from carrying out his objectives. We as the resistance in Hezbollah have only one option, and that is to prevent the occupation from fulfilling its goals.
The new leader of Hezbollah expressing his disinterest in US politics there. Well, let's go up to the north of Israel and our correspondent Bakr Sladin. So, Bakr, we had the sirens blaring across central Israel twice today, didn't we?
Yes, several times actually in Israel in general, especially here in the north. But yes, you're right, twice today. And by the way, a few minutes ago, Hezbollah is publishing a new video, a propaganda video, saying or claiming that they are using, or they have used actually today in their attack toward the center of Israel, some of the Iranian ground-to-ground missiles. We're talking about the Fateh 110. This is supposedly one of the most advanced weapons that they have, or one of the most advanced missiles that they have, and they are claiming that they have targeted a military base near the Ben Gurion airport. We know that one of the missiles fell, or either because it was intercepted, fell in the area of Ben Gurion airport, and this of course of a significant value. And we've seen that the Israeli Air Force also escalated maybe as a response to that, and targeted several sites in the area of Dahia, the southern suburb of Beirut. The RAF is announcing that they have targeted storage facilities and Hezbollah infrastructure that is embedded in the civilian areas in the southern part of Beirut. This was also an escalation from the Israeli side because of the numerous attacks against many areas in Lebanon, in Al-Biqa, and also South Lebanon. We're talking about a bigger number of people that were reportedly have been killed as a result of that. We're talking about 35 people at least, according to Lebanese reports, and a larger number of that also were wounded. But also from the other side, here in the north, a large barrage of rockets that was targeting the area of Avivim and Tzfat this afternoon. Apparently 50 rockets were fired. Some of them were intercepted, but others fell on areas that also were damaged as a result of that, and also fire erupted in many cases. We're talking about immense damage actually in that area, and a number of people that were injured. It's not clear whether we're talking about being in a situation, a life-threatening situation, but the Ziv Medical Center said that 2 of the people that were injured are now treated in the trauma room, and they are in a moderate condition, but there is no life-threatening situation in that case, at least.
OK, Bakr, thank you very much indeed for that update. Bakr Sladin up in the north of Israel. Yaakov Lapin and Asher Fredman still with me in the studio. And Yaakov, around this time last week, there were some hopes of a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. Is that completely off the table now?
I don't think it's off the table, but I think, Hezbollah is very interested in signaling to what remains of its base and to its Iranian patron that it is able to continue to launch a long-term war of attrition, even if it's firing a fraction of its original firepower. I'll just remind the viewers that according to the assessments in the first week of a full-scale war, Hezbollah was supposed to be able to fire over 10,000 projectiles a day at the Israeli home front. And so while the situation in northern Israel is certainly intolerable for northern Israelis, Hezbollah's capabilities have been drastically degraded. Naim Qassem is speaking to us, I believe, from Iran because he can't be in Lebanon because he'll face assassination there and a targeted airstrike. And the Radwan invasion, mass murder invasion plan and infrastructure on the border has been essentially dismantled by the IDF. So Hezbollah is a shadow of its former self, but it's still a threat. And so the dilemma that the Israeli cabinet has to decide upon is it going to expand its ground offensive or settle for a truce? And if it settles for a truce now, it's going to have to commit itself to enforcing that truce. That means that southern Lebanon becomes a Hezbollah-free zone. And when they try to crawl back into southern Lebanon, and they definitely will try, it has to be Israel that enforces that arrangement. Nobody else can do it.
Asher, your thoughts on Hezbollah? Very much still a threat.
Well, to date, the IDF has been striking Hezbollah leaders and infrastructure in Beirut and other parts of Lebanon and carrying out a very limited ground operation, 2 or 3 kilometers from the border. As you know, I took part in that as well as a member of the reserve forces. While those operations have been successful in their goals of destroying Hezbollah infrastructure, we found quite a lot of weapons and missiles. That is not a sufficient amount of pressure to get Hezbollah to agree to any kind of deal, in my view, that will allow the residents of the north to return to their homes safely. The threat of the anti-tank missiles, which have a 10-kilometer range, is still quite there. We see still their capabilities. In order to bring Hezbollah to the point where we'll agree to a deal that will allow the residents of Avivim and Shlomi and Hanita and all the other towns to return to their homes, we're going, in my view, we're going to need to expand both the airstrikes, and that goes towards the American support, the American weaponry, and that will hopefully change for the better, and expand the ground operation to approximately 10 kilometers to push Hezbollah back, and then, as Yaakov said, to enforce that Hezbollah-free zone afterwards.
So you think diplomatic efforts have reached an end simply because we have a lame duck president in the White House now as well?
I think that if and when Israel expends that kind of pressure on Lebanon and on Hezbollah, a diplomatic agreement will be possible. I don't see the U.S. successfully pushing for it in the current conditions. I think first Israel has to increase the military pressure with U.S. backing, and then some kind of diplomatic deal becomes possible.
So we could be looking at many more months, do you think, of fighting in Lebanon?
I do think so. Obviously, the weather plays a part in it. The rain, my assessment, we will see this campaign going on at least into the spring, summer of the coming year.
All right. OK, thank you both for now. We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, the Prime Minister fired his defence minister last night on the eve of the US election, and there have been some protests throughout the country. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the Abraham Accords. Can we expect them to be renewed under President Trump? More on that next. Stay with us.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are?
Introducing I-24 News' brand new news website.
On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it.
So what are you waiting for? Download the I-24 News app today.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish World Weekly. I'm Caleb Ben-David, and each week we're going to bring you the latest from the Jewish world, from politics to religion, entertainment to the latest trends, and everything in between. Join me each week as we explore the global Jewish diaspora. Don't miss Jewish World Weekly only on I-24 News.
Yesterday they put these statues here, and it's from the Dia of Muertos, a Mexican culture.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at IsraelBonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at IsraelBonds.com.
Welcome back. Well, with most of the world watching the US elections last night, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu decided to announce he was firing his defense minister. It is the second time Yoav Gallant had found himself fired. And once again, the news brought thousands of angry Israelis out onto the streets. Well, our senior correspondent Bianca Zanini has the latest.
Protests broke out in major cities across Israel on Tuesday night after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced the firing of the country's defense minister Yoav Gallant in the midst of a war.
Unfortunately, significant gaps were discovered between me and the Minister of Defense Gallant in the management of the campaign. And these gaps were accompanied by statements and actions that contradict the decisions of the government and the decisions of the cabinet. In light of this, I decided to terminate the term of office of the Minister of Defense.
Netanyahu cited a crisis of trust after months of open disagreement between the two Likud party members. Gallant has repeatedly criticized Netanyahu's handling of the war in Gaza, saying it lacked clear direction and objectives. In his final speech as defense minister, Gallant called on the government to bring back the hostages in Gaza while they are, quote, still alive, and vowed to continue to protect Israel's security.
I am proud of the defense establishment's achievements. I trust our soldiers and their commanders. The security of the State of Israel has been and always will be my life's mission, and I am committed to this.
The firing caused anger among many Israelis who took to the streets carrying Israeli flags, blocking traffic, chanting anti-government slogans, and calling for a ceasefire for hostages deal now.
I'm here tonight because the government is again failing us. In the middle of a war, they are really firing a minister that is the only minister that we thought he cares. He cares for the people that are abducted in Gaza, and he cares for the soldiers, and he really cares for the country.
Where our Prime Minister is doing absolutely nothing to free the hostages and the kidnapped. He's doing nothing to safeguard our peace, the peace of the Palestinians, the peace of everybody in this region. He incites war, confusion, blood and death, while we just want normal living like any normal country, like we were before.
Foreign Minister Israel Katz will succeed Gallant as defense minister, while Gideon Sa'ar will become the new foreign minister.
So can we expect more protests? Well, let's go down to IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv. Our Emmanuel Honora is standing by. Emmanuel, what's happening?
Right, Laura. Well, we can expect more protests because, in fact, the protest is happening right behind me as we speak. And it is not the same size as what we saw yesterday night already, but it is much bigger than most of the hostage protests that we've been seeing here in this area of Tel Aviv for the last few days, for the last few weeks, in fact. This is relatively large, and there's a massive, actually, pretty big police presence stacked around the area. And they've already blocked traffic. We spoke to a few people earlier, and they're saying that this is just another political move on behalf of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, that this is only for political gain and political considerations, and in fact it is at the expense of national security. And the main issue here, and in fact outgoing Defense Minister Yoav Gallant expressed in his statement last night, and when he said that his main concern is that Israel is going to abandon the 101 hostages that are still being held captive in Gaza. And he is, in fact, just echoing what so many Israelis are feeling since this war began and since there has been such a stall in these negotiations, a stall in these talks for such a long time now, Laura.
Emmanuel, thank you very much for that update. Emmanuel Honora down in central Tel Aviv. Well, let's get back to the US election results and the impact it will have on the Middle East, and more specifically on the war in Gaza and on Palestinian hopes for statehood. Well, the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, who you remember once referred to Donald Trump as the son of a dog, has sent his congratulations, and Hamas has said that Trump will be tested on his claim to want to end the war. We're here to talk about all of that. Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib is a Gazan writer, an analyst, and he's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thank you very much for being with us, Ahmed. Great to have you on the show. And first up, I mean, as a Palestinian and one who is in the United States, how do you feel about Donald Trump's victory? He has been very pro-Israel in the past, and he has also been very disparaging about Palestinians. At the same time, though, he says he wants to end this war. What are your thoughts?
Well, thanks for having me. What makes this Trump victory particularly unique is that he's been able to walk a fine line, if you will, of promulgating a pro-Israel narrative that appeals to many of his conservative constituencies. On the other hand, he's been able to miraculously pull together a group of Arabs and Palestinians and Muslims around this idea that he's going to be able to end the war sooner than any other Democratic politician or official could. So on the one hand, he's reviled by many in the Arab and Muslim community from his past administration, in which he moved the embassy to Jerusalem, in which he recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, in which he cut off funding for UNRWA, for the Palestinian Authority. On the other hand, there's this belief, probably based on desperation, that maybe he could be, his unpredictability and his demeanor may be the only salvation for a rapid end to the war in Gaza.
Yeah, there is unpredictability for Israelis as well as Palestinians, I think. And I think that, as you rightly point out, part of that is dependent on who he surrounds himself with. I mean, just talk me through the best case and the worst case scenarios for Palestinians when it comes to Trump.
Well, what I predict in the near future will happen is that he will place heavy pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu's government to bring the war to a rapid end, at least, or at most, until he is inaugurated on January 20th. He would not want to walk into the White House while the war is still going on. However, what concerns me is the potential price and deal that he will strike with the current Israeli government to implement this ceasefire and hostage deal. If that's what it ends up being, we know that Mr. Trump is likely to bring back David Friedman as U.S. ambassador to Israel, the very ambassador who orchestrated said embassy move, who has written a book published this year talking about the need for Israel to annex the West Bank. And so there's a very good scenario, and I know people in the periphery of Mr. Friedman who have said that he aspires to make it the official policy of the United States that Israel should go ahead and annex the West Bank. This scenario would, in fact, be a heavy price for ending the war in Gaza and would actually have severe consequences. It would be the death of the two-state solution. It would potentially trigger the end of the Palestinian Authority as we know it, especially if Mr. Trump cuts off the funding to UNRWA and the Palestinian Authority. It could trigger a third intifada. So that's what concerns me and several analysts who are watching this closely, that the war in Gaza may end, but the price may be too high when it comes to the West Bank.
He did, however, during his first term, try to come up with a solution for the Israelis and the Palestinians. He was in favour of a two-state solution, and he came up with what he called the deal of the century, and that was angrily rejected by the Palestinian president, of course, Mahmoud Abbas. I mean, do you think Palestinians might be more open to talking to him now? They might see Trump as their last chance to get a state?
Precisely that. I think, on the one hand, the Palestinian Authority is going to put on a public show, if you will, a performative show that says we stand by our original positions and stances from the last administration. On the other hand, I think there's a real recognition that we are approaching the point of no return. Trump is going to push for the Saudi-Israeli normalization deal, for the Saudis to get nuclear civilian technology and to obtain that long-awaited mutual security and defense treaty with the United States, which is going to be much easier to pull off now with a Republican-controlled House and Senate. And so, and in exchange, we know that the Saudis have offered normalization with the Israelis. However, they said that they will not proceed with this normalization without a clear path towards achieving a Palestinian the two-state solution, the establishment of a Palestinian state. And so we could be looking at a scenario where the Saudis and the United States place maximal pressure on the Palestinian Authority to engage pragmatically and practically with Trump's new and rejuvenated deal and any other proposals. And I hope they do, because we are approaching the point of no return when it comes to the entrenchment of the Israeli military occupation, the entrenchment of the settlement movement. And this may be our last chance, particularly with Saudi Arabia on our side.
Yeah, it could be a very interesting year ahead. Ahmed, thank you. We appreciate it. Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib there.
Thank you.
With me in the studio, Asher Friedman, the director of the Misgav Institute for National Security, and Yaakov Lapin from the Lapin Assessment on Patreon. Thanks for staying on, both of you. And I guess when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Asher, the big difference between the Republicans and the Democrats has been described as the Democrats think that creating a Palestinian state will bring about peace in the region, whereas the Republicans see the Abraham Accords and normalization and acceptance of Israel in the region as the way forward.
Exactly. And under President Trump's first term, we saw 4 historic peace and normalization agreements between Israel and Arab states. And under President Biden, the fact is we saw 0. Now, President Trump coming in with his approach, I think there is a real chance both for additional bilateral agreements. Saudi Arabia is certainly the crown jewel, but there may be other countries that we should approach first. Also for advancing paradigm-shifting multilateral initiatives, whether it's the India, Middle East, Europe trade corridor, which could revolutionize global trade and be an alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative, whether it's a Middle East security architecture or defense alliance, which would allow the countries of the region to cooperate in unprecedented ways and counter the threats from Iran and from Muslim Brotherhood terrorist organizations. So there's tremendous potential, and if we move forward in all of those avenues, I think the conditions could be created for integrating the Palestinians into that future of stability and prosperity and lasting peace.
Well, which, of course, Yaakov, is what the Saudis say they want eventually. They want a pathway to a Palestinian state.
Right. So, I don't want to dash any hopes, but I really think that talk of a Palestinian state in this day and age after the 7th of October is simply fantasy. If we're defining a state as, an entity that has full control over its territory and the IDF can't go in whenever it wants to stop terrorist threats, that's simply not going to happen. But I think, what could happen is a Palestinian autonomy in the Gaza Strip. We already have a Palestinian autonomy in the West Bank. Maybe they'll join up. Maybe they'll stay separate for a while. I think an autonomy with growing levels of civic independence is certainly something that can be looked at, and integrating, as Asher said, that into a regional framework. But there simply is no way that I can envisage the Israeli people accepting a fully fledged Palestinian state run by a corrupt, incitement-filled Palestinian Authority, which can barely right now hold on to its own territory. So, best case scenario, it's going to become some sort of failed state, and in a worst case scenario, it'll be taken over by Hamas. These concepts, I think, are gone. After the 7th of October, they're just not realistic. They're empty talking points. We can talk about a Palestinian autonomy. It's not going to be more than that. There's going to be one military that's active between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River, and that is going to be the IDF. There will be no other military that's active in this land for years and years ahead.
Okay, thank you both. Well, Donald Trump's most significant foreign policy move during his first term was the signing of the Abraham Accords, but the process of normalization between Israel and the Arab states stalled under President Biden. Can Trump inject fresh life into them? Our Joe Brown has the story.
In September 2020, on the White House lawn, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu signed an agreement with the foreign ministers of the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, normalizing ties between Israel and the Gulf countries for the first time. This agreement, known as the Abraham Accords, was widely lauded as one of Trump's greatest foreign policy moments, and one which he said he would like to expand on.
We would have had 12 to 15 countries within a period of, literally within a period of a year, I think, at the most. If I win, that will be an absolute priority, just getting everybody in.
But the Middle East has changed a lot over the last 4 years, with conflicts shaping the region. So can Trump build on the Abraham Accords in his second stint in office? And if so, how? From the Israeli standpoint, there is a willingness to improve relations with its neighbours.
I aspire to continue the process I led a few years ago of the signing of the historic Abraham Accords and achieve peace with additional Arab countries. In the Abraham Accords, we achieved 4 peace treaties. And I underline, peace for peace, peace of strength, with important countries in the Middle East.
But it's not that simple. Before the war with Hamas, US President Joe Biden was trying to outdo his predecessor and successor Trump by brokering a deal with Israel and the largest Arab nation, Saudi Arabia. This normalization was in return for a security agreement between the US and Saudi Arabia. The sticking point on the Saudi side was that Israel had to recognize a Palestinian state, which the Israelis refused, leading to the deal failing. But now, reports are circulating that Washington and Riyadh are in talks for a separate security deal, one that doesn't include Israel, and they will rush to finish this before Trump takes office. But with the wars in Gaza and Lebanon raging on, and regional stability on the knife edge, the president-elect wants to not only build on his old legacy, but create a new one with a long-standing peace that has evaded the region since Israel's inception.
I want to see the Middle East get back to peace, and real peace, but a peace that's going to be a lasting peace, and that's going to happen.
Well, better to go after that report than Riyadh. And we are joined by Saudi journalist and commentator Abdulaziz Al-Khamis. Wonderful to see you again, Mr. Al-Khamis. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. And tell us, what is the reaction in Saudi Arabia to Donald Trump's victory?
I think it's most of the Saudis, they think Trump is very easy to talk and have no agenda against Saudi Arabia. And we already have problems with the Democrats' department last 4 years, and now we have a future of making good relations, especially in the Senate with the Republican, and we can have a good deal, very solid, not changing by every coming president who have his agenda. Democrats have a what they call it, a human rights agenda against Saudi Arabia, and they are carrying Obama way and policy with Iran, not strong against Iran. And that's why Trump is very good. But again, the problem is how the American will solve the problems in the region. How we can cooperate as Saudis and Israeli and American and other Arab countries in the region to have solutions for all of the problems, not waiting for Iran to come and destroy all of our way to peace.
So the million-dollar question for everyone in Israel is, will the Saudis now be more likely to commit to joining the Abraham Accords now that President Trump will shortly be back in the White House?
I think it's, when you call it Abraham Accord, I think Saudis will not join Abraham Accord. They will have their way of accord, there are many ways to have a peace process with Israel without become a part of Abraham Accord, because the Saudis, they think themselves as a very big country, and they represent the Muslims and Arabs, and they are the most important country in the Arab world and Muslim world. That's why if they are going to the peace with Israel, they need their way to solve the problems, especially the Palestinian problems. I heard one of your colleagues here, one of the guests, talk about there is no, Palestinian states. But and I think, in my opinion, the Saudis, they don't want it as soon as possible. They want a way to stop the wars, to guarantee the security for the Palestinian and Israeli, and give the Palestinians a good life. And we can have a lot of way and to process this one without having what they call it a full state solution for the Palestinians. We know we have a very bad government in Ramallah, corrupted. We know Gaza under the control of Hamas. We know the problems, the Palestinians' problems. That's why we should help them, all of us, Saudis, Arabs, Muslims, and Israel and America to have a good, what to call it, good environment to have a peace and stop the Iranian activities in the region, and how the Iranian benefit from our what you call it, laziness, not going to have a peace in the region. That's why they did a lot of bad things in the region, because we are not good to have a peace, not good to go in a good soul to the peace.
Well, I'm sure few would be able to argue with that. Sounds like a very common sense proposal. Just really quick, are you confident that Donald Trump will be firm when it comes to Iran? He is talking a lot about ending wars. He doesn't want any more wars to start. Do you think he will stand up to Tehran?
We will not talk we will not see Trump have a full power in this one. He have 4 years before, and he didn't do anything against Iran, only the killing of Qasem Soleimani. But we know there's the American army generals who have other thoughts. We know that Foreign Office desk, they have other thoughts, CIA. It's a country of establishments, and these establishments, they don't want to go to war against Iran. But depends what the Iranian will do. We think even the Iranian, they don't want to go to war, but they have in trouble now because with Israel. And I think Israel have a full right to defend itself. And all of us, Arabs and Israelis, they are agree Iran did and doing a lot of enemy activities in the region, and the Iranian policy is not good for us. Let us see what's Trump. He can bring us together to talk and to have policy together as a countries in the region. How he will do it, and how the Israeli will accept it, and how the Iranian will act against it.
Yep, a lot to find out. Abdelaziz Al-Khamis, great to talk to you as always. Thank you very much indeed.
I appreciate it.
Well, let's go elsewhere in the UAE now, because we're joined by Arab-Israeli peace activist Loai Al-Sharif. Great to see you, Loai. Thank you very much for being with us. And, I mean, I know it's no secret you have long championed Donald Trump, partly because of what he did with the Abraham Accords. But, Loai, there are some strong isolationist voices surrounding Trump now. Are you concerned that he might turn his back on the Middle East?
Not a chance. Not a chance. And those who say Donald Trump is unpredictable or you cannot really predict what he did, let it sink in. The only American president who made genuine peace deals between Arab states that had no issues with Israel, no real issues or no real wars with Israel, was Donald J. Trump. And he delivered what he promised, even to the Jewish people, when he talked about moving the embassy to Jerusalem. His team was devout to the peace in the region. They named the accords a religious name, Abraham Accords, named after our forefather, the father of our father Ishmael, Abraham, and the father of the Jews, Isaac. I don't think that he would turn his back. He would absolutely expand the accords. And thank God, yeah, I was. It's not a secret, honestly, Laura. I was championing for Donald Trump, because I know he's good for our region. I told you, our region is a tough region. He's a tough guy. Thank God Kamala Harris didn't come to the presidency. I pray. I really thank God this morning. I say, Baruch Hashem, thank you, my Lord, that Kamala Harris did not win this presidency. Other than the woke movement and the men playing into women's sports and other things like that, which I don't really support, but other issues as well. Donald Trump is a blessing to our region, and I believe, inshallah, he will expand the Abraham Accords, and I'm so optimistic about that, Laura.
Well, what about the fact then, Loai, that he says he wants to stop the wars. He wants to stop wars, not start them. You know, Israelis might argue they need to win wars, not just end them. Is there a risk that Trump is going to just want to put a stop to all of this for his domestic audience?
No. Stopping wars, like no more wars. But Israel, about this war, I believe Donald Trump will give Israel more power to crush Hamas. This is the right word to use. To crush Hamas, not to put more limits like what Kamala Harris and Joseph Biden, the president of the United States, did before. Do not go to Rafah. Going to Rafah is a grave mistake. And Bibi responded, a smart and brave response, when he said, we will finish the job in Rafah. And guess what? They killed Sinwan in Rafah. Imagine if they listened to Kamala Harris, the one who wanted to be a president. Israel would be doomed. Israel should be thankful that Donald J. Trump is the president of the 47th president of the United States. Of course, he will deal with Iran by cutting the funds, by narrowing down the road to Iran, by not indulging Iran, just like the American administration now is doing. I believe it will be a very strange policy. And I told you, it's a tough neighborhood, needs a tough guy. And Donald Trump, I believe he will do what he promised, because we've seen in the past 4 years, not the past 4 years, in the first 4 years of his presidency, he delivered what he promised. And I have great trust in that. And I'm very optimistic that we will make the Abraham Accords great again, because the first year of the Abraham Accords, we saw many Arabs and Israelis hanging together. Hamas didn't like it. Iran didn't like it. The enemies of peace didn't like it. And to some extent, they succeeded a bit. But with the help of God, we will come back and we will prevail and we will crush them with knowledge, facts, and the truth, and we will make the Abraham Accords great again.
Well, all right, you've been right so far, so let's hope that continues. Thank you very much indeed. We appreciate it. All right, Al-Sharif there. Thank you. Real quick comment from you both, Asher.
Lowy has been a fantastic champion of peace, so I'll add my thanks, my gratitude. President Trump can place crushing economic sanctions on Iran's energy sector, its oil sales to China, on its financial sector, on its military-industrial complex, the same ones that are selling the drones, the UAVs, to Ukraine. And that could be a way of avoiding an all-out war, but putting real crushing pressure on Iran that could eventually force it, together with a credible military threat, force it to change its ways.
All right, thank you, Asher. Yaakov, real quick, the last word to you.
Iran has proven its ability, unfortunately, to circumvent sanctions. Without secondary sanctions on China for buying Iranian oil, that's going to be difficult, and China and Russia are going to stop anything that the United States pushes forward in terms of sanctions at the UN Security Council level. So we're in a divided world, and it's not the kind of world where the whole world's going to come together and press sanctions on Iran. And the existence of the Iranian regime is the core problem in the Middle East. Until that regime is basically falls because of internal pressure and revolts, we're going to be dealing with many security problems up ahead, hopefully now with a freer hand.
Yaakov Lapin, Asher Feldman, thank you to you both. Do stay with us. Our special coverage continues. You're watching a special edition here on I24 News. Donald Trump's victory in the United States comes amid an escalating conflict between Israel and Iran. Iran, of course, has vowed to retaliate after the recent Israeli airstrikes on Iranian military positions. Well, today, on the news of Trump's victory, the Iranian currency, the rial, slumped to a record low. Our Lynn Plachmeyer has more detail.
Following Trump's win, the Iranian government spokesperson has commented on his victory. US election results, which saw Donald Trump return to the presidency, will not heavily impact Iran, she said.
The election of the U.S. president doesn't have anything specific to do with us. Major policies of America and the Islamic Republic are fixed, and they won't heavily change by people replacing others. We have already made necessary preparations in advance.
Amongst the Iranian people, Trump's win has led to cautious optimism, despite crippling sanctions Trump placed on Iran after America pulled out of the 2015 nuclear accord, which have caused a dire economic situation on the ground. On Wednesday, the rial exchange rate even hit a record low.
Well, when he returns to office, the first thing he'll definitely do is increase sanctions to put pressure on the Iranian government. After that, he'll create conditions that will either lead to some changes in Iran or lead to conflict. Gradually, as these extensive sanctions start to lessen, Iran might return to its peak days.
Look, our main issue with the US is Israel. That means we will never back down from our hostility toward Israel. Now, if they come and say they will stop supporting Israel, maybe something could happen. But if they want to continue supporting Israel, I don't think anything will change.
The relationship between the US and Iran had worsened during Trump's first term. According to Fred Fleitz, a former CIA analyst who served under Trump, he is likely to step up pressure on Iran. Fleitz believes that Trump will increase sanctions on countries that have violated American-led sanctions the first time around. But whether Trump will go to war with Iran is a whole different issue altogether. A senior European diplomat in Washington has said that Trump has, quote, a huge aversion to conflict, in which he is not dissimilar to Biden. Under Biden's administration, the US has put a lot of pressure on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to not strike Iranian nuclear and oil sites in its retaliatory attacks after the assassination earlier this year of Hamas head Ismail Haniyeh and after the Iran strike on Israel in October of this year. But with Iran threatening to strike Israel once again, reportedly as soon as the coming days, Trump will have to make a decision on how to navigate the Iran-Israel conflict a second time around.
So not so happy in Tehran today. Well, my studio guest this hour, Shiri Feingorsman, is a member of Forum Dvora, Women in Foreign Policy and National Security, and she's the former head of regional affairs at the Israel National Security Council. Good to have you with us, Shiri. Yaki Dayan is the former Israeli consul in Los Angeles.
Good evening, Laura.
Welcome.
Good to be here.
So before we get to Iran, I want to get your initial reaction as Israelis on the victory of Donald Trump, what it means for Israel at this very difficult time, what it means for the future going forward. Shiri.
Well, first of all, a survey just came out. Like, most Israelis are pretty happy, and I think that's a sentiment shared by both experts and most Israelis. I want to exclude that from the list of people who also support Ukraine, and then there is a kind of a conflict of interest that they feel. Generally, I think Israelis should be happy about this. It's good for Israeli interests, especially with normalization in Saudi Arabia. If anyone can bring that achievement, I think it would be Donald Trump.
Okay, Yaki?
She is 100% right. I mean, most of the Israelis support Donald Trump. They wanted to see another term of Donald Trump. And I believe that the upside from such a term can be enormous for Israel. If you look at his first term, it was a very successful term in terms of Israel-American relations, from the Abraham Accords to the movement to CENTCOM, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, the Golan Heights, recognizing the Golan Heights, and so on and so forth. He was a very forthcoming president during his first term, and there is nothing that makes you wonder that he might not be a good president for Israel on his second term.
You're not concerned about the isolationists who were in his circle, who were not there the first time around?
So that's a very good point, because, you know, there are two major trends within the Republican Party: the MAGA, as you said, the isolationists, the separatists, the separatists, and the evangelicals. And I do believe that as the evangelicals were extremely influential during the first term, they will continue to be extremely influential on his second term. But we have to wait and see who is going to be his members of cabinet, because this is going to be extremely important. The people who will run the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor, those are the most important people. And when we see who those people going to be, then we will be able to say for sure that this is going to be a good term in terms of Israel-American relations.
I think Israel stands out in a way of its relations on this one, because basically Netanyahu went to Congress and said, give us the arms, we'll do the job. Just don't get in our way. Help us.
Ukrainian Zelensky's also saying that.
Exactly. Yes, but there is a difference here. It's a long-term relationship where we take the arms, we make it better, we send it back. It's all used by U.S. dollars. It's a very fruitful relationship when it comes to mine. And so I think Netanyahu gets it. He speaks in those terms both to the American public and the Israeli one.
So this is a very important point, because if Netanyahu speaks a certain language, it's the Republican language. And
but they did fall out personally, didn't they? Donald Trump is no longer
But you know, I think they broke bread since then.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Yeah. I think, Donald Trump has a tendency to, you can't really read it if it's behind him or not, or it will come up in memory in one day. So we'll have to wait.
He does seem to remember personally.
Netanyahu, this time, Netanyahu didn't wait for a few days to congratulate him. He already called him.
Okay, all right. Thank you both for now. Well, let's talk a bit more about what President Trump's policy during his second term will be. There is a recurrent theme here. Who will he surround himself with in that second term? And that will be particularly important when it comes to Iran. Well, with me now, Gabriel Nerona is the former special advisor for Iran in the US State Department under Secretary Mike Pompeo. Thank you very much for being with us, Gabriel. Good to see you. And the big question I'm getting here from Israelis is, will there be a role for Mike Pompeo, do you think, in the second Trump administration?
Inshallah. Well, I'm not going to speculate too much on the president's cabinet picks. But what I can say is this: the people who he is considering, who are close to him on national security, share a few things in common. They share a deep affinity for the people of Israel. They share a deep and abiding belief that we should have unconditional support for Israel's defense in every sphere, whether that's in Gaza, whether that's in southern Lebanon, whether that's confronting the Islamic Republic of Iran, and a host of other issues. And so what I would say to my Israeli friends is, I wouldn't worry too much.
Can you give us a hint of who might possibly be in that cabinet? Are you hearing any names?
So what I'll say is the names that are under public speculation include former Ambassador Rick Grinnell, current Senator Bill Hagerty, Representative Mike Waltz. Mike Pompeo is on some lists that are being floated publicly, and former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, and then a host of other individuals who are working in the first Trump administration at the National Security Council at the State Department. Again, there's not a lot of daylight between them on Israel policy, or frankly on Middle East policy altogether. Yes, there are some differences on approaches on Ukraine, differences in sort of strategy on how we confront the Chinese Communist Party. On the Middle East, you're seeing a lot more alignment between the various camps of Republicans.
Well, I mean, Trump is talking a lot about ending wars today. He has said he wants to end the war in Lebanon before his inauguration. He said he wants to end the destruction. He doesn't want any more wars going on. I mean, Israel might argue that it needs to win wars before it ends them. Is there a risk that Trump will just be just like the Democrats and impose fragile ceasefires on Israel and its enemies?
One of the most important things here is expectations. The fact that the rial hit an all-time low today and over the last 12 hours is exactly indicative of that the global situation is reflecting, hey, we're not going to have a president that's going to appease the Islamic Republic of Iran. You're not going to have a president that's going to care about Hamas's extortion or Hezbollah's extortion. They won't get someone who is sympathetic to their terrorism. And so I think that by itself is going to send a message to Hezbollah and many others. You're not going to get a great situation now. Maybe you should wrap it up under Biden where you're going to get a better, more favorable deal to your own interests.
What about the Iran nuclear deal then? Of course, Donald Trump pulled the United States out of that, arguably on the advice of John Bolton, who is someone he publicly now despises. Do you think Trump will seek to make some kind of deal with the Ayatollahs?
Well, I can say, and I don't speak for the president, but I think I can say pretty confidently the JCPOA is dead, completely dead. He had that view that the JCPOA was a terrible idea long before John Bolton advised him. He's only become more convinced now that it was one of the worst deals out there. Now, that being said, President Trump supports diplomacy. He's willing to talk to just about anyone. He talked to Kim Jong-un. He's willing to sit down with him twice. I don't think President Trump would ever close the door on diplomacy, but it is not going to be this weak-kneed diplomacy where they're on one side of a hotel and we're on the other and we don't talk. There's not going to be us giving concessions up front, begging them to talk. You will see none of that. If there is a diplomacy, it will be out of pressure, out of a position of strength.
Gabriel Nerona, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having me.
Music to our ears.
Well, I was going to say, is that music to your ears?
100%. I mean, if the people that he listed will be in the next Trump administration, I think Israel is extremely lucky to have those people. All of them are very good friends of Israel, and I think that the most important and crucial issue is the Iranian issue, and especially the nuclear military program. And here, Trump said few things. Yes, he wants to reach some kind of a deal, but he said, I'm not going to use sanctions anymore. This is not good for the United States. And I do believe that he will be willing to use a credible military threat. That this is the only instrument that can actually stop the Iranians from making any progress in their nuclear program, something that the last president, who was extremely favorable for Israel, was not willing to use.
Okay, sure.
So this is a very important point, and we'll have to see what happens sooner rather than later. We're getting into such a sensitive time. What happens if Iran attacks tonight or tomorrow? What will the Biden administration react? What will they do? Will they be bipartisan stance against it? Are they watching? Look, there are reports that they can reach the nuclear capabilities in weeks. If that's so, if I'm Iran, that's what I'm doing now. I'm racing towards time to get that. It's a dangerous.
It's dangerous and very difficult because.
And more. And this is what I'm saying. It's a sensitive times, and we have to have all eyes and all options on the table, and we have to be very quick. And I just hope that Trump has the time to relate to this.
Are you worried that we're in kind of a no man's land right now in terms of?
In a way. In a way, I think it's very sensitive timing until Biden leaves. From many perspectives, I just want to remind you, UN Security Council 2554 by Barack Obama, who was really in the last weeks of his presidency. Listen, after we lost
Biden is not Obama. Biden is really, he's really a Zionist. He really loves Israel. I don't see any possibility that he leaves in as part of his heritage something which would be not good for Israel.
Well, we remember at the end of Obama's.
I don't see that.
Do something to embarrass Netanyahu, for instance.
Yeah, but he might embarrass Netanyahu, but not something that would damage Israel, something lasting as not vetoing a Security Council resolution or having a weapon embargo. And even if he does that, what Netanyahu understands that he has only 2 months to survive during this administration, and he can do that even if there is a weapon embargo, which there won't be. But I'm saying if the worst case scenario happens, even then Netanyahu can manage.
Okay, all right. Thank you both for now. Well, Trump's victory could also see some changes in US policy regarding Iraq. US troops are still stationed there and have come under attack from Iran-backed militias recently. But Trump is also keen to end the presence of US troops in the region. To talk more about all of this, Colonel Rich Outson is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and a geopolitical consultant for Dragoman LLC. Good to see you, Rich. Just first of all, then, your reaction to Trump's victory. Was this a surprise, and what does it mean for the US policy in the region?
Well, I don't think it's a surprise that he won. The polling edge that Democrats have to have in the current electorate for the popular vote, they generally need to be up by at least 2% in order to win the Electoral College. So I don't think at any point that the sort of center of gravity of the polls had Kamala Harris up anywhere near that 2% mark. So most people thought a Trump victory was possible. I don't think anybody saw it coming, winning the popular vote with over 300 electoral votes and then taking the Senate and possibly the House as well. So I think there was a big misread there. I personally was not surprised he won. Obviously, that's the side I favor. But the degree of the victory actually gives him a strong hand in terms of hitting the ground running.
And do you think he will be more or less likely to pull troops out of Iraq and kind of speed up that process?
Well, it's interesting. I think the three things you need to know about Trump and foreign policy in the Middle East or elsewhere is that, first of all, he has a clear theory of the region. And his theory of the region is that Israel is an unabashed friend of the United States and that there are other allies, and that being coy about whether you're an ally of the United States or not is not good business. And the other part of that theory is that Iran is the source of most of the mischief in the region. And so he's shown before in his first term, going after Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad, for instance, that he's not afraid to hit in Iraq against Iranian interests when those pose a threat to the United States. The second thing is that he has a better handle on escalation dynamics, frankly, than the current administration does. And I think the current administration clearly also is aligned with Israel and wants to support Israel, but has badly misplayed how to deal with the militia threats and the Iranian campaign of proxy warfare. The third thing is Trump does have an idea or an eye for deals. So all of that means that he's going to look at every investment the United States has in the region, including troops in Syria and Iraq, and say, what are we getting out of it for our national interests? What risks are we incurring for that? Now, in the case of Syria, I think there's a real chance he goes again for a real reconsideration of what we're getting from our troop presence there. Iraq's a little bit different because of the status of the Kurdistan region, which is tied up with U.S. energy interests and sort of the longstanding U.S. presence in the north of Iraq. So I don't think he'll rush to get out of that, but I think he'll take a more assertive stance in Iraq against Iranian militias that are pushing on U.S. troops and be much more forceful than what we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months.
Do you think he'll be more assertive when it comes to the Houthis in Yemen, who have caused absolute chaos in terms of world trade? I mean, that is something that Trump is likely to look at closely. Do you think we might expect more assertive military might from the U.S. in that area?
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think he will not shy away from the use of unilateral force. At the end of the day, he's a businessman, and it sure looks like the Houthis are pirates attacking commercial shipping selectively, avoiding any attacks on Chinese shipping, for instance, but going after American and Israeli-linked targets. So I think for sure that will be the advice that he gets, and I think he's likely to act on that to restore deterrence against attacks on international commercial shipping in the Red Sea.
Colonel Rich Outson, great to talk to you as always. Thank you very much.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
Well, Trump's win had an almost immediate impact on Iran. As we've been reporting, it did send the Iranian currency, the rial, to a record low. But the Iranian regime dismissed Trump's victory. In the last few days, there have been a number of high-profile crackdowns on human rights inside Iran, the execution of a young Jewish Iranian man, also a dual national, Jamshid Sharmad. A young woman was also arrested after she stripped off in protest at the enforcement of hijab laws. We're here to talk about all of that. Kaveh Shahruz is a lawyer and senior fellow at the Macdonald Laurier Institute. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, Kaveh. Is there any sign at all of what the Iranian people make of the fact that Donald Trump has just won the election?
Good to be with you, Laura. Yeah, I mean, I've been observing social media all day. I think Iranian people, by and large, are pretty happy about this, at least from the messages that they're putting out there. I think they remember during the Trump administration's first term that Trump took a very hard line on the Iranian regime. It had a maximum pressure campaign. This was the administration that killed Qasem Soleimani, and the president himself was very outspoken on Twitter, his favorite medium, about supporting Iranian people. So I see a lot of enthusiasm on the part of Iranians. Obviously, the regime feels very differently. But I mean, I think we have to be cautious. The President-elect Trump, I guess we can call him that now, he has spoken in contradictory ways about what he's going to do. On the one hand, we remember the pressure that he put on the Iranian regime. On the other hand, he said that he's not interested in regime change and that he can live with the Iranian regime. So it's a little bit difficult to know exactly what direction he's going to go and whether people's excitement is actually warranted.
Right, and we've just had the election. We're in a bit of a no man's land when it comes to the power in the United States, a bit of a power vacuum for the next few months at a very, very critical time in the conflict between Israel and Iran. Just your sense of how this regime might react. Is it feeling cornered? Is that why we've seen this crackdown on human rights lately? What is your sense of what's happening?
Yeah, I think the crackdown that you alluded to is generally a sign that the Iranian regime is feeling threatened. It tends to do that. It tends to lash out at its own citizens, at its own prisoners when it feels threatened internationally. I think the Iranian regime would much rather have seen the Democrats maintain control of the White House. It is it's probably very afraid of what is to come with Donald Trump in the White House. And I think, they're a regime that will capitulate if they feel like Donald Trump will take a hard line against them. During these couple of months until January 20th, when President Trump swears their oath of office, I think you will see behind the scenes them trying to reach out to the Trump administration and trying to figure out whether or not there are concessions they can make so as to avoid, the wrath of the new American administration.
And is there a risk that if they feel they have nothing to lose, that the Iranians might be racing faster than ever towards building that nuclear weapon?
Yeah, that risk is definitely there. I mean, the President Trump has said that his top priority is ensuring that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon, and that may be the Iranian regime's only security guarantee. So they may be rushing between now and January to actually become a nuclear state. That risk is definitely there, but I based on just kind of what I know of the Iranian regime and how it has functioned over the past 40 years, whenever it feels threatened, it speaks with a lot of bluster, but in effect, it always capitulates. And I think they are much more likely to seek accommodation with the Trump administration than to seek confrontation with it. Confrontation will be the end of the Islamic Republic, and they certainly don't want that.
Kaveh, thank you very much. Kaveh Shahrouz there. And I'll bring it back to my studio guests, Shiri Grossman and Yaki Dayan. Shiri, your reaction?
Look, I mean, there are elements, I think, of radicalization in every country right now. And I think that's what's going on in Iran, and that's why we're seeing so much confrontation, a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran, something that we haven't seen in so many years. And I assume there are forces that are trying to push Khamenei into those areas and to take a tougher stand. And that's why we have this ping pong back and forth. And that's why I fear the risk is that there are voices that Khamenei now is listening to that are more harsh line, that are more hawkish.
Laura, it's not by coincidence that the Iranians were terrified from another Trump term and they tried to assassinate Trump. They intervened in the American elections. They really under pressure now. Having said that, it doesn't mean that they would move forward with their nuclear plan. They are moving anyhow all the time. But crossing the lines, no, because they are part of the NPT. They know that it doesn't matter if it's during a lame duck session of Biden or they move to a Trump. This means a direct confrontation with the United States. Now they're extremely vulnerable. They don't want to have a direct confrontation, and they would try to avoid that as much as possible. So I agree that they would try to reach some kind of accommodation. And I think they recalculate now their response to Israel because they wanted...
because they had vowed to respond imminently.
Exactly. They wanted to respond heavily against Israel. And I think now they understand that they are much more exposed, not only to an Israeli reaction, but also to an American one.
I mean, how do you think Israel should play it right now? Of course, Israel is right now in the waiting game. Iran has said it will respond for those strikes last month. They had warned they would do so before the US election. Clearly, that hasn't happened. Is Israel just forced to wait patiently to see what happens?
I think in this checkmate chess game, I think Israel is actually waiting for Iran to make that mistake. To make a mistake.
Exactly. They want to have that.
They want to see that it making a mistake. I'm just not sure that it won't anymore. If I wasn't, I mean, I didn't understand the last time. I don't understand. I mean, if they do it again, the only thing I can think of is that they try to find like in between, like something from the Houthis, from the militias that they can denounce. They say, no, it's not us. I'm not sure it will be enough, and that's the test. If Israel and the Americans would say, no, I mean, this is our red line, even if it's a militia, even if it's a proxy, I'm not taking it anymore. And I hope that's what a new administration will bring, because this has to stop.
Listen, if I could advise the Biden administration right now, they have 6 B-52 now in Qatar. And if he wants to leave some kind of a legacy, if the Iranians move their missiles, they preparing for an attack, this is the time for a preemptional strike. That would definitely leave a very strong message, not only in the Middle East, but also in Asia and in Europe.
Okay, all right. Thank you both. We're going to take a very short break. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we seem to be living in the era of messages, don't we? Strong messages going all around. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, Turkey's President Erdogan has congratulated Trump. The two leaders did share a mutual admiration during Trump's first term. We'll talk more about that, and also about Erdogan's efforts to change the Turkish constitution so that he can serve another term. More on that next.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish World Weekly. I'm Khaled Ben David, and each week we're going to bring you the latest from the Jewish world, from politics to religion, entertainment to the latest trends, and everything in between. Join me each week as we explore the global Jewish diaspora. Don't miss Jewish World Weekly only on I-24 News.
Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are?
Introducing I-24 News' brand new news website.
On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it.
So what are you waiting for? Download the I-24 News app today.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at IsraelBonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at IsraelBonds.com.
Welcome back. Well, before we return to our discussions on the political upheaval in the United States, some news a little closer to home. Hezbollah has been attacking Israel today with multiple barrages of missiles, one of which fell close to Tel Aviv's main airport. The IDF has been responding with heavy airstrikes today on Beirut. Let's go up to the north of Israel and our correspondent Bakr Sladin. And Bakr, we're hearing in an update a foreign worker was killed in one of those Hezbollah attacks.
Yes, another tragic incident today. Apparently, in that large barrage of rockets around 7 p.m. When Hezbollah fired 20 to 25 rockets, a person that was in an open area apparently was hit by one of the rockets. We're talking about a foreign worker again, and this is the 7th time that such a thing happens. This also comes after this afternoon. The barrage that hit the area of Avivim. 50 rockets were fired. Some of them intercepted, others fell and caused a lot of damage. Lots of fire there, and even the fire workers are still working and operating in that area from what we understand as well. Also, in that incident, a number of people were injured. Maybe we're talking about 5 to 6 people that were injured. It's not clear because of some censorship on that incident specifically, but at least 2 of them were announced to be in a moderate condition, according to what the Ziv Medical Center has said, and they are conscious, so they're not in any critical condition or in any life-threatening condition. This is happening while we're talking today about some escalation, specifically the rockets that were fired toward the area of Gush Dan, the area of Tel Aviv. In one incident, Hezbollah has used, according to their video, the Fateh 101 missile, one of the most advanced missile, the ground-to-ground missile that originally is from Iran, of course, and that missile apparently was intercepted, or the missile itself fell in Ben Gurion airport. Until now, the Beirut airport is out of the equation. It's not clear whether the IDF or the political level in Israel will reconsider that thing as well because of this escalation. Also, drones today were fired toward the area here, and in one incident they were intercepted before they entered the Israeli airspace. One other incident was also intercepted in the past few minutes as well. One more drone in the area of the Jordan Valley, the Bakr, as it said in Israel, and we're talking about a drone that was fired from the east. So maybe the militias that are close to Hezbollah and Iran, were the ones responsible for that. That's not the first time that they take responsibility for such a thing, and they have said also in the past couple of days that they will upscale their attacks against the Israeli territory, and that's one more incident that, from what we understand, also ended without any casualties or damage, but that thing also continues and imposes another challenge for the Israeli air defense system.
Bakr, thank you very much indeed. Bakr Sladin there up in the north of Israel. Well, with me in the studio this hour, Shiri Fine-Grossman from Forum Dvorah and Yaki Dayan, the former Israeli consul in Los Angeles. Thank you, both of you, for staying on. So, Shiri, we're clearly a long way off, aren't we, from Israel's stated war aim of making the north of Israel safe enough for people to return to their homes. Yet another civilian killed today in a Hezbollah attack.
Look, you really have to divide it to two immediate threats. One was really near the border, and the other is the rocket threat. And to the rocket threat, there is no really good answer except of conquering all of Lebanon, going to years and years of an offense, and I don't think Israel has the legitimacy or the manpower to do so. So I think that's why the Israeli government has very smartly said, you know, we want to bring back the people near the border, and we'll do that by taking a very narrow strip in a very long border, which IDF has pretty much conquered the whole thing into 1-2 kilometers, and in some places even went deeper. But I'm not sure it would be enough. We have to wait and see. Look, I think Hezbollah is waiting for some kind of a good deal. I don't understand still completely what the Israeli government wants to do. There is a lot of criticism by residents. I feel like, in a way, if a ceasefire will come, and I think it will in near future, the residents will go back, like people in Sderot. They went back because it's quiet and people want to go home, and that force to go home, back home to your house, is huge.
It's a powerful need,
and it's hard to resist. Again, there's life itself, schools and clinics and things that are not working now. That will take time to amend.
Israel has huge achievement in the military operation in Lebanon. I mean, eliminating 80% of their capabilities. And as Shiri mentioned, the entire ground operation that stopped the option of invading Israel from the southern part of Lebanon. Those are huge achievements by Israel, and we should not forget that this is 40 days for the elimination of Hassan Nasrallah, so another huge achievements. Now, there is no, and there would never be 100% assurances that no missile would attack, would hurt Israelis. But what Israel now is doing is simultaneously fighting and proposing political solution, a political deal, which is kind of the Security Council Resolution 1701 plus, with the possibility of preventing and enforcing any move by the Hezbollah that would go against those paragraphs in 1701. So I think the paper is on the table right now. And today, in the telephone call between President Trump and Netanyahu, I'm sure that one of the things that Trump mentioned is, finish those wars till January 20 when I come. And I think that there is a good option of terminating this war in Lebanon till the 20th, because the Hezbollah understands also that the terms under Trump would be much harsher than the ones that they can reach now. So I'm rather optimistic that the solution can be reached currently, right now.
Thank you both. Well, let's talk a bit more about what to expect from a second Trump presidency when it comes to Lebanon and Iran. We're joined by Dr. Walid Fares, foreign policy expert and the author of many books, including Iran, Imperialist Republic. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, Walid. Good to see you again. So your initial reaction then, first up, is a Trump victory good for the Middle East?
Absolutely, it's good. We can compare with the first Trump administration, and now we're going to have a second, a little bit different Trump administration, because he's free. He won't be, up for re-election, and he has learned a lot. His group has learned a lot from the facts that took place during his administration and during the Biden-Harris administration. But let me be a little bit more specific in this case. What he has built that he may use is, first of all, a very solid relationship between the U.S. and Israel, maybe with this government or any government. That's a principle that he has, enforced. Second, the Abraham Accord. The Abraham Accord is a big achievement. It brought together Israel and, the other Arab countries who have already formed an Arab coalition as of the summit of Riyadh in 2017. All these instruments, all these realities are going to be used again, or are going to be applied again by the next incoming Trump administration. A second matter, which I don't have an answer to until January the 20th, is that he is going to bring into his administration people who are experts, people who actually have spoken and said many things during the last 4 years of the Biden administration. And what they have said, basically, we can get inspired from regarding Gaza, regarding, the Islamic regime in Iran, and regarding Lebanon. So I can see the early change of policy that will be done by the Trump administration, but we'll have to wait, obviously, the next months to see the details of what he's proposing.
Well, a lot rides, doesn't it, Walid, on who Donald Trump will listen to when he takes office in January next year. Will it be Mike Pompeo? It certainly won't be John Bolton. He's made that pretty clear. But it could also be Tucker Carlson, Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek Ramaswamy, isolationists, NatCons who don't want the United States to pay for or get involved in any more foreign wars.
I see where you're going. And I understand that this is going to be a debate within the transition and, of course, before appointments. But remember that now President-elect Trump has also strategic allies in the region. Yes, he could have all the advisors he wants, but there are realities. The main ally is Israel. The second ally is a coalition of Arab countries, very important for the United States and for Israel as a matter of fact, but third allies also. They are undeclared groups in the region who also are confronting and fighting the whole axis from Tehran to Beirut's Hezbollah to the Assad regime to the Houthis all the way down. And each one of these threats against Israel has an opposition. Now, the next architecture should be what would a Trump administration and an Israeli government together in consultation with their, Arab partners, one would say, do to push back against Hezbollah. I heard the conversation and many conversations in Israel. What can Israel alone do regarding Hezbollah? That's legitimate. That's their plan. But I think the Israelis will have to start thinking about what can they do with allies, because that would change the equation in Lebanon and Syria all the way to Iran.
Now, during his first term, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, had a key role, and he was the one who helped get a lot of success with the Abraham Accords. There are some suggestions that Trump has another favourite son-in-law now. This is the son of Mansour, Lebanese businessman who did help Trump win over a lot of Arab American voters. Do you think that he might sway Trump more in the other direction, more of a pro-Lebanese position, perhaps?
Well, I may differ on the description. I don't think there is a Lebanese position. There is a Hezbollah position, and there are anti-Hezbollah forces. Whomever President-elect Trump will dispatch to do the deal will have to work under the Trump either government or transition to deal with that. But let me be clear. As we just announced and analyzed, between now and January the 20th, let's say early February, Israel is on its own, not just on its own, is free to take strategic moves to secure itself, and then in coordination with the Trump transition. Yes, the members of family that you have mentioned have done a lot for President-elect Trump, especially in Michigan, but they execute a policy that Donald Trump will decide. So they're not going to have a different policy. They have served him. They have given him victory in domestic politics. But when it comes to actual what to do in the Middle East and geopolitics, other than just giving victories in Michigan, without which it would have been very difficult for the Trump administration to form. So I am confident that at the end of the day there will be all views. You have mentioned other persons who are very friends with the president-elect, and you have qualified that it could be very isolationist, their approach. Nothing is secret. I mean, most of them are my friends, and we know their position. But it is also balanced with people who have served in the army, in the intelligence, and regional and international friends as well.
All right, fascinating. Great to talk to you, Dr. Walid Faris. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, President Trump's commitment to international institutions, including the United Nations and NATO, is under scrutiny. Trump has ramped up the pressure on European countries when it comes to funding the transatlantic alliance, and there are fears that enemies of the West could see that as a sign of weakness. Our Emma Siegel has more.
President-elect Donald Trump has long been a skeptic of the North Atlantic Alliance, also known as NATO. In his first term, Trump reportedly even considered pulling the U.S. out of the organization. But he quickly changed his tune.
NATO is becoming different than it was, much bigger than it was, and much stronger than it was because people are now fulfilling their commitments. There are some countries that aren't fulfilling their commitment, and those countries are going to be dealt with. Maybe I'll deal with them from a trade standpoint. Maybe I'll deal with them in a different way.
In the past, Trump has accused European members of spending too little on defense. In a February rally, he said he would encourage Russia to, quote, do whatever the hell they want to NATO members that did not pay up in defense spending. While this sparked concern amongst world leaders, NATO chief Mark Rutte was quick to congratulate Trump on the election results.
I just congratulated Donald Trump on his election as President of the United States. His leadership will again be key to keeping our alliance strong. I look forward to working with him again to advance peace through strength through NATO.
In a longer statement, Rutte emphasized that members were increasing their military spending, a response to Trump's persistent criticisms. NATO estimates that 23 of its 32 members will meet its target of spending of at least 2% of GDP on defense this year. Germany hit the target in 2024 for the first time since the end of the Cold War. But while several EU heads of state were quick to congratulate Trump and express willingness to work with him, many are concerned about what his victory could mean for the future of the Russia-Ukraine war.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will be settled quickly. I will get the problem solved, and I will get it solved in rapid order, and it will take me no longer than one day.
How exactly Trump plans to end the war remains unclear. While he offered few details, many speculate that he will use his friendly relations with Russian President Putin to secure a truce. The U.S. is NATO's biggest funder and is on track to spend $968 billion on defense this year. How this may change under Trump is yet to be seen.
Well, the president of NATO member state Turkey has congratulated Donald Trump. Recep Tayyip Erdogan wrote on X that he hoped Turkey-US relations would strengthen and that regional and global crises and wars, especially the Palestinian issue, would come to an end. Well, let's go to Istanbul to talk a bit more about that. We're joined by journalist Ayla Jean Yakli. Good to have you with us, Ayla Jean. Is it fair to say that there was a certain level of mutual admiration between Trump and Erdogan during Trump's first term?
Yes, it was called a bromance, if you will. The two men had a long-standing relationship. You know, they met well before Trump was elected president the first time, when he came to Istanbul in 2012 to open a Trump Tower here. And so when he was elected president, Erdogan was one of the few world leaders he actually knew when he took office. And from there, the relationship grew quite close over the years. There was reporting that Erdogan was the world leader whom Trump spoke to the very most, that Erdogan had an open line to the White House, to the Oval Office, that he could call whenever he wanted to. And Turkey felt that it had a receptive, sometimes admiring ally in Trump. So yes, they had a close relationship, one that was built, that helped sort of shift the bilateral relationship into one that was based on their relationship, bypassing some of the institutions that could sometimes dog Turkey. Those institutions included Congress. So it was, from a lot of perspective, from Turkey's perspective, a fruitful relationship, but also one that did cause Turkey trouble at times as well.
Ayla Jean, stay with me. I just want to bring our viewers up to date with some news just coming in. We've just learned that Vice President Kamala Harris has made a phone call to President-elect Donald Trump to concede defeat and to congratulate him on his win. And Kamala Harris is expected to speak within the next few hours. So we will, of course, bring you that. Stay tuned. But back to Ayla Jean to talk about those comments from President Erdogan. I mean, since Trump's first term, arguably Erdogan has become more authoritarian, I think it's fair to say. He's also firmly aligned himself with Islamists. He's embraced Hamas. Do you think that could be a problem? That could be a bump in the relationship?
It potentially could. You know, there are issues in which we expect the disagreements that Turkey has with the U.S. to continue, and one of them is the war in Gaza. You know, that's something that has divided the two countries. You know, it's important to note that while Erdogan and Biden didn't have anything approximating the warm relationship that Trump and Erdogan had, they did seem to, at least over the last year and a half, find a way to work together. That came after Erdogan himself was reelected president in 2023. The U.S. did take a step back, let's say, from criticizing Turkey over issues such as its human rights record, and found a way to sort of work with Turkey. In the end, you know, securing Turkey's support for NATO expansion to include Sweden, something that Turkey had blocked. So it's just important to say that while, you know, Trump and he might have this close friendship of sorts, there are issues that really do divide them. And during the first term, it's important to note that there was a lot of turbulence in the relationship. You know, Trump could vacillate on his approach to Turkey. He threatened Turkey with sanctions 5 times, which I think is a record, between two NATO allies. And when he finally did put what were somewhat toothless sanctions on Turkey over its holding a prisoner, a U.S. evangelical pastor, it set Turkey's currency into a spiral. Turkey's never really recovered from that economic turmoil. So there is potential for bumps in the road ahead.
It will certainly be a relationship to watch during that second term. Ayla Cinyakli, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, during his first term, President Trump was accused of betraying America's Kurdish allies in Syria. The Peshmerga forces helped the West to defeat the Islamic State group, but Trump later withdrew US troops, leaving the Kurds at the mercy of Turkish forces. And the situation has since worsened, with the Turkish army regularly attacking Kurdish civilians in Syria. Well, to talk more about that, we're joined by Giran Ozkan. He's the Executive Director of the Kurdish Peace Institute. Thanks for being with us, Giran. So, I mean, as always, Kurds are not a monolithic bloc more than any other group. But what generally is the reaction, would you say, of Kurds in Syria and in Turkey regarding Trump's victory?
Well, I think at this point, the Kurds still don't know what to expect, because as you also said, during President Trump's first term, he both provided the Kurds with logistical and military support to defeat ISIS, but on the other hand, decided to withdraw in 2019, which led to a devastating Turkish invasion. And so what we can say, though, since President Trump's first term in 2021, the Middle East has gone through some serious upheaval. ISIS is still a threat. Iran's destabilizing actions have increased. And so what I think in President Trump's next term is that he really won't want to allow for northeast Syria to become a staging ground for attacks against Israel, or some sort of a land bridge for Iran to transport weapons and troops to Lebanon. And the only force, the only people in northeast Syria that are preventing that from happening is the void, the governance and security void that the Kurds are filling there. So I don't think President Trump will just leave that mission very soon.
Well, I mean, a lot of people are competing to get President-elect Trump's ear at the moment, especially here in the Middle East. Of course, there are so many competing rivalries. And what can the Kurds do to get Trump's attention and to make their case to him?
Well, I think the Kurds are already doing as much as they possibly can. In northeast Syria, as I mentioned, they are building structures and forms of governance that are, relatively speaking, in relation to the rest of the country or the rest of the region, have kept it stable and peaceful for the best part. What Turkey has been doing, however, is destabilizing that region. And when I talk about the main headings, possibly the main priorities for a second Trump term, which will be, as he says, stabilizing and bringing peace to the world, then I think continuing his relationship with the Kurds is going to be a part of that. Because in every other heading, when we talk about China, when we talk about Russia, or when we talk about Iran, the Turkish state seems to be on the opposing side to the US and Israel on these issues. And so that, I think, increases the Kurdish value in the eyes of the West.
Giran Ozkan, great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we go, a word from my studio guests. As we can see, there are a lot of competing interests, a lot of rivalries, a lot of conflict going on in the Middle East, and a lot will depend on who President Trump listens to in his second term.
Definitely. You know, this reminds me of an anecdote we had during my time in the NSCS Regional Affairs. Brett McGurk was the special envoy of Trump to fight ISIS. And then Trump came out and announced that he's leaving Syria against Israeli interests, Kurds' interests, the fight against ISIS. And McGurk quit after that, and now he's the head of the Middle East and the National Security Council of the Biden administration. And, you know, it's funny how everything kind of stays the same people and the interests. And that was surprising. There was a lot of nuance. There was a lot of different interests when it comes to Trump's policy, and it's really keeping about, you know, the best interests that, as he sees it, of America, saving money, not going into wars. And he was very much influenced by Erdogan on this decision. But it's really in the end it was succeeded to cancel leaving of American troops in Syria, and they're still there. So there is potential. We need to know how to speak to Trump.
Final thoughts, Yaki.
In terms of policies in the Middle East, there is no daylight in two things between Biden administration and the Trump administration. I mean, he doesn't want to see boots on the ground, no doubt, and he wants to be a deal breaker. But the question is how, and the instruments that he's going to use, and that very much depends, A, on the people that are going to surround Donald Trump, and B, it's going to depend on Donald Trump himself, if he would be willing to use military power, in order to reach those deals that he wants to reach in the Middle East.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Sharifai Grossman, Yaki Dayan. Thank you very much, and thanks to you for watching, and do stay with us on I24 News, A Real American, coming up next. Khaled Ben David will have a special programme for you on those results from last night. Stay with us. Thank you.